What's up, YouTube? I have this is a follow-up video for my Virpil Warbird and throttle thoughts that I had provided a long time ago. Just a little recap. I had originally started with the T16000M from Logitech, I think it is. And that thing was broke right when I got it. I had to send the first one back. The throttle had a little axis button that was, or lever that was broken right when I got it. And that axis button also died on the second one that I got. So, in my opinion, that's a problem with that unit. The other things I didn't like about it is that the throttle slid as opposed to went around a circumference, whatever the word I'm looking for is. It just slid on rails, so the thing got really hard to push. You had no fine-tuned controls over it. There was no detent for the middle. It was a good controller for a little bit. In my opinion, it's a little pricey at 120 bucks or 125, whatever I paid. It so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I'd hate to see what a $60 joystick is, but then again, I think what you're paying for is $60 for the joystick and $60 for the Hotas part. So, or for the throttle, I should say. So, you're really not spending any more than 60 bucks. It's just times two because of the two units. I had bought a VKB after that, and the VKB broke. There was a button on the top, and the problem that I ran into with that is that top button. I was just in there playing one day, and it quit working. Like it sank down into the stick part, and that was it. It just quit. I looked at what was wrong with it, and apparently there's a spring in the top, which is what I was thinking, and the cap sits on that spring. Well, when you push down, the spring's supposed to push it back up, and I wasn't pushing hard. I was just playing like I normally do. Apparently the spring was probably a little too tall for what it was trying to cover. Like the thing came out a good quarter of an inch out of the top. So the spring was way bigger than it probably needed to be. Like they could have compressed it a little somehow or something. But mechanically, I think what it did is it just kind of shifted. And once it shifted, it fell out and fell down into the stick somewhere. I tried fixing it, but man, that thing had just a ton of parts and switches and little caps on switches and nothing lined up properly. I should have sent the thing back on warranty, but I just threw it away. I got sick of it. And that's when I started using my Virpil completely. I do have some regrets with this Virpil. First and foremost, the absolute biggest regret is I bought this for a space game. And when I picked this up, I stupidly bought just the regular flight version with no twist on the Z-axis. And that was a huge mistake. If you're buying this for Star Citizen or Elite or anything like that, get the one with the twist. You can get rudders and all that if you want those. I don't have rudders, and rudders for me doesn't make sense. I am at a sit-stand desk, so I would have to move the rudders and try to work that while I'm standing, and that just isn't going to work. So a twist version is key. I do like this, and I did work around it, and there is a workaround in Elite that I used. I've not played enough Star Citizen to know, but we'll get into that. So anyway, that's my big regret. I do think I want to get I'm thinking about getting the whole new base and stick with the Z-axis, and I believe they actually have, so I bought the fancy lot of extra buttons on this, and they have this in the space version now, so I think I might look at buying that. I'm thinking about it anyway. I need to get back into playing more space games more of the time, but I really like this setup, and if you want the easy answer and you want to spend some money, get this thing. I can tell you, this is worth the money. I think this was somewhere around 800 bucks. It's probably been a year since I bought it, or 9 months, so I don't remember how much this cost exactly, but it was pricey. So problem number one with this is its cost. It is very expensive. These are, I believe, hand built. You can't see it, but this plate here doesn't match this plate here. There's like a gap. A weird, you can tell somebody built this thing. It's very nicely built, don't get me wrong. The machining and the edge work The materials used is very nice materials. Nice thick plastic. The buttons feel good. There is nothing that I would say is cheap about this. The VKB, the bass felt really good, but the throttle or the stick part felt kind of chintzy. The buttons were okay. The T16000 I got really felt chintzy. Plastic was okay, but just certain aspects of it just felt cheap. This thing feels like it's an $800 setup. And the reason it's so much is because you have to buy multiple pieces. You have to buy the bass, you have to buy the stick, and then you have to buy the throttle separately. And I have not really looked at it, but they have a whole new throttle, a slightly different version. It looks a little more aerodynamic or something than this gigantic box. Like, I didn't really look at it, but it looks the same. It's just more rounded around the edges and stuff, not boxy. So problem number one with this whole setup is its cost. Problem number two is shipping. If you want this fast, it takes like a month to get to the United States because I think it's coming from somewhere. It's somewhere in Europe. I want to say Poland or something, but I can't remember now. It takes a while to get here. So you can't just order it and hope it's there, and it takes a while. There's no Amazon quick shipping on this. The other problem with that is it's expensive. It takes a while to get there. You also have to get in line to order these things. They have a global restock every once in a while, and if you miss that restock, you may have to wait a month before you can order the next one. So not only are you waiting a month for shipping, you're waiting a month to order the thing to get shipped a month later. So it can be a process. And I know when I ordered mine, I had to wait quite a while before I could get it in stock and then get it ordered, and then you have to wait on that list. I mean, it's a waiting process. So not in a hurry. I talked about build quality. This thing is excellent. The absolute only thing that I have a complaint about is this switch right here. This, for some reason, to me, feels a little cheap. I think it's the same switch as probably these, but it just doesn't feel... I don't know. I can't really describe it. It just... Something about it just doesn't... It seems cheap. Feels cheap. But it's probably the same switch as these other ones. It's just something about it just doesn't quite feel right. And I can't put my finger on it. Like I said, build quality is great. Let's see what else we got to talk about here. Issues. We're talking about problems. So I talked about... maybe I haven't talked about it. I did a earlier take. So this thing is really tall. And I know that works great for, you're jumping in a cockpit of an airplane and you've got the joystick down between your legs and you've got plenty of height in the cockpit and everything. Problem when you're on a desk, this thing is really tall. The T16000 and the VKB were both a lot shorter, probably this tall compared to this thing. So you were down further. It's not that it tips, it's that it's tall. Like, I have a sit-stand desk, so that puts my hand up at an angle when I'm sitting, and it puts my hand up higher when I'm standing. So it's a little uncomfortable. I should probably lower the desk if I'm going to use this thing. If I was going to mount it on anything, I would make sure that it is a lot lower. The moment arm, whatever you want to call this, that this thing moves is a lot more too. So when you're trying to angle over with the other controllers, they may go this far. This thing goes that far. So you may bust your knuckle up against the desk or something. I know they have desk mounts that come down and you can mount this thing on. You may have issues with that. You may run into things depending on where you place this and where it's at. For me, it's on an open desk. But like I said, I have to raise my hand. You get a little bit of arm fatigue from sitting there holding the thing up at that weird angle. Like I said, I could probably lower my desk a little bit and cover for that, but it's just something that you have to keep in mind. It is taller. They are heavy. This is not that bad. This thing is heavy. I don't know how much this weighs, but it is sizable. The extra weight isn't a problem on my desk. My desk has no problems lifting it up and down. but I could see this being a problem if you were going to mount it on something. That extra weight, like they have chair mounts you can put this stuff on. This thing is a ton. And I could see problems if you have a cheap chair and the mount doesn't, maybe a good mount on a cheap chair, it may just rip off and fall away. You have to be careful of that. There are mounts on the bottom for putting this thing in. There are adjustments for the throttle portion. I've not used any of that. I just basically the way I work with this is when I'm going to play a flight game, I've moved this stuff up on my desk, and I've got a video coming either in this or another video, depending on how long this gets, that shows how I set this up. You can actually set this up with the keyboard and the Hotas and the mouse and everything to where you can play like Star Citizen. You're going to get out of your ship and go do things, so you can actually set this up on a desk with no problems that way. Elite, you're just always in the cockpit, so there's no need to get out and walk around with the mouse and keyboard, although I do use the mouse and keyboard for other functions in the ship. There are certain things in Elite Dangerous that I like on the Hotas, and there's other things that I've just ran out of space, so I use over here. So with that in mind, the person that was asking me about my follow-up thoughts on this was asking about Star Citizen and something like that too. And I gotta be honest, I have not played very much Star Citizen. I have it. I mainly bought in so I could check into it every once in a while. I know the game's going to get there at some point, but it's not there now. Like, it's not even really a game. It's just a sandbox you can go do stuff in. And that's cool. I definitely don't mind that, but when I want to play, I want to play a game. You know what I mean? I'll check in on that every once in a while, but I don't really know a whole lot about how Star Citizen's going right now. I haven't really checked in on it. I know there's a new flight model. I think I played before the new flight model got put in, so I have not set this up for the new flight model at all. I have not even tried it. I've got, along those same lines, I have IL-2 Sturmovik, and I bought it to try this out, but I'm not a flight sim guy, so I don't know how to set the thing up. I need to sit down and spend some time on it, but I've been playing so many other games, I haven't got there yet. I picked up Infinity Battlescape. That game I tried for a little bit. The game itself was a little difficult to figure out how to navigate around in, so much less having the Hotas to fight against and figure out where all the buttons needed to be. I tried it out the weekend it came to early access, and then I haven't really played it. I was going to check it out for this review here, but there wasn't anybody on. Apparently everybody's waiting on some big update or something, so can't tell you about that one. What I can tell you about is Elite Dangerous. I have played a lot of Elite Dangerous, and I've used this. I think I have 300 hours into Elite Dangerous right now on the PC. I don't know, I put another 100 or 2 on the PlayStation before I got all this set up, and that was a few years ago. But I've put 300 hours on the PC, and most of that, probably 150, 200 hours of that, was the flight across the galaxy that I've documented in my other YouTube videos from early last year. Now that was all, I don't remember the exact time when I started trying out the other, the VKB and then this Virpil. I don't remember when I got all that compared to how long things were, but I would say I've probably put 50 hours into this. Would be a good conservative number. I know I put the bulk of my time that I've played on the PC side into that T16000. The VKB saw some time, but it crapped out so fast. I like the joystick, but it just, and they don't have a Hotas, or they don't have a throttle. I keep saying Hotas. They don't have a throttle, which was why I ended up sticking with the T16000 throttle and then eventually using this throttle when this came in. So, let's see, we've covered some negatives here. The price, the shipping, the waiting for stock and all that good stuff. The weight of it, the height of it. I don't think I have any other negatives. Everything else I would say is just positive. And those are not so much negatives as maybe more concerns or things that you need to be aware of when you're going to look at purchasing this. I mean, the cost is pretty high. But I kind of feel like you buy this and you never have to buy another one, right? I've already spent money on the VKB, money on the T16000, and I could have just bought this to begin with. This is what I really wanted. And I held off because of the price, and I'm like, man, this is super expensive. And now I'm sitting here thinking to myself, boy, I should have just bought this, buy once and never buy again. But it is a daunting task when you're looking at the price of this thing and you're like, well, there's $40 ones and then there's $800 ones. You know, I could buy a lot of $40 ones. And that is true. The downside is that once those break, they're broke, right? So if you're in the middle of a fight somewhere, it breaks and that's it. You got to order another one. So if this thing was to last, say, forever, if this lasted like I never had to buy another one again, then I would never have to worry about something being broke while I'm out on the other side of the galaxy in Elite. You know what I mean? That was a big concern with the axis that was broke. I kept waiting for that thing to die and it kept getting worse and worse. I had to start remapping buttons and everything, and it just got ugly. And with this, man, this thing is like Cadillac of, you know, you want to use the car analogy, it's like the Cadillac. So let me tell you what I do like about this thing, which is pretty much everything. We'll start with this. So there are a ton of buttons on this thing. You've got what I use is main fire button. I believe this is my secondary fire button. No, I'm sorry, my bad. Primary trigger. You've got secondary fire for Elite. I do not use this in Elite Dangerous, but it's a flip down trigger. This is a 2-stage trigger, which I don't actually use the 2-stage part, but I use the trigger. You've got, what is this, an air brake or something like that. I don't actually use this. There's a shift button down here that I don't actually use. I don't believe I've used this for anything, which I probably could. There's the pip management for, what do we got? Systems for shields, and then engines, and then weapons. I should probably map things onto this because I have them mapped to my arrow keys. I have not done that yet. I use this here for rising the ship up and down, left and right, mainly for landing. This is for menu selection. This is for some other selection. This is where I parked my Z on. And when I have my other video for how I actually use this, I use this little here instead of the twist. I use this on the right and left to go Z. So you've got your normal XY axis here, and then this is the Z axis. That button's a little finicky, and I don't really like it all that much. But it works, and that's how I've gotten around it. There's a heel pad for your hand. This thing raises up and down. My hands are big enough. I don't need to raise it. And that's another thing. This, for my big hands, this feels good in my hands. I was kind of worried that the stick would be a little too thin, like made for smaller people. I don't want to say it's made for big or small. It just feels right. I don't have a problem reaching any of the thumb buttons anywhere. And flying, I don't even have to look down. I know where all this stuff is. Like, I hadn't played in a few months when I did this a few weeks ago, when I made the other video that you're going to see. And I hadn't, I just sat down and I was like, man, this is like, I hadn't forgotten any of it. It was just naturally there. And once you get used to a Hotas, and the way it's set up, you just never forget. You just sit down and you're like, man, right there. It's just so natural. Once you've got it set up and ready to go, it feels great. For this, we'll go over some features of it. There's a little lever back here that lets you slide these independently, so you can actually run two separate throttles for whatever games use that. I don't use that in Elite Dangerous. I use the one throttle. In the back of this, there's the, what do they call these things? The, cams. I think they're cams. The little cams that are inside this thing, you can actually adjust. I think it's the tension, the stiffness on how this moves. I left mine at the default. I think you can make them harder and softer, and I think they're fine the way they are. I don't have any problems. Um, and then there's some adjustments you've got on this side also. I have not changed anything. I just use it the way it is. I'm not really sure what I would change on it, so I don't know the difference. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what I'm missing out on by not changing anything. For the most part, there's a hat here, here, and here. There's a thumb button here. There's another hat. There's some more buttons, a dial, and another button here. This has a detent on it. This throttle has a detent on it. Like, you can visibly hear it click. So with Elite, I used to have to, on the T16000, I used to have to click a button to go in reverse. With this thing, I just pull backwards and push forward. So if I want to go forward, I push forward. I go backward, push backward. It's something I can't tell you that it's like one of those nice things. When we went from VHS to DVD, I was adamant against DVD. I know it was better and blah, 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 but you never know how you've missed something until you actually get there. And then you're like, man, why didn't I do that before? That detent is something that you don't necessarily miss, but once you have it, you're like, man, that is great. That is nice. X4 foundations. I forgot to mention that. I have X4 foundations and I've played just a small bit of that. I tried using the Hotas with the T16000. That game requires a detent in the middle. You don't have a detent on that T16000, so you don't know where the middle is to stop. With this, it just snaps right in. Now, again, I haven't played very much on X4, so I can't really speak a whole lot to it, but that game really brought the detent situation kind of to the forefront. It made it, important to look at. With Elite, you just push a button and you go backwards. And then you push the same button to set it back into forward mode. So it was something I never noticed. But once I set this up, set Elite up like this, huge difference. You're trying to park in the station, man, it is so much easier. Forward, backward, and all that good stuff. So this I have pretty much keyed out. Everything is set up on here for something, and you'll see that in the video that I have. I do not use this. I actually don't use these switches. I couldn't figure out how to make them work. Like Elite doesn't seem to have a on-off. See, these are on-off, like a light switch. I don't know if you can see that or not. But Elite doesn't seem to operate with on-off, like a toggle. Like it says you pushed forward, and then you have to change the state to backwards. So these here are momentary contactors. Like this pushes forward and it's on, and then you push it back and it's off. This here is you push it forward and it comes back to the middle. You push it back and it comes back to the middle. So these, I think, probably have a better chance of being used in Elite than these do, because these momentarily go forward and then come back. So you can push it forward to turn it on and push it back to go off. The other thing is this is registered as a switch, not two switches. So it's not forward position, back position, it's position. So that made it a little weird, and I couldn't figure out how to get that set up in Windows. So I don't use the switches. In fact, maybe that's a good place to start. I don't use this. I don't use any of the switches. I don't have the button configured. This, I believe, is supposed to be able to change modes where you can have different setups or the colors that this thing sets up as. I don't use that. I don't think I use these. And I don't think I use this one. This I do use. This here I use like an old school radio tuner for picking up channels. There's a scanner in Elite that works perfect for. And guess what? It's got a detent in the middle, so you can tell exactly when you're in the middle, which is important. And I do point out in that video I've got, if you can see these buttons here, these I all have programmed. So I use those. Now, that brings me back to one other problem with this throttle. And it's a Windows problem. And I think I saw people, was it the T16000 maybe? Somebody was complaining about one of the throttles that you could only map so many of the buttons in Elite. And I thought it was maybe Elite Dangerous that had the issue, and I think it's more of a Windows issue. So Windows can only see like 26 buttons or something like that. I can't remember, 26, 42. I don't remember the exact number. But you basically have to download another piece of software, which I don't recall the name of. And that piece of software will map like these other switches to keyboard buttons. So now you have to map keyboard buttons and then map the throttle to the keyboard. Follow me? So that seems way complicated to try to have to remember which button's been used, which button hasn't been used. Whereas with the other buttons that you can map, you just pick a point. And here's the thing. Each hat, I believe, gives you like 4 or 8 of those 20 or 40 positions that you can pick. I think, if memory serves. It's been a while since I configured this thing. But it's not just the button itself. Like the hats also go into it. And the more points on the hat, because they're treated as a button. So if that's an 8-way hat, you've now lost 8 positions on your button setup. I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think that was an issue that I had. Speaking of issues, one big problem with Virpil, and I don't know it's necessarily them, it's just the way that they interact with the USB device. So these are USB devices. I had to plug one into my keyboard because I have a keyboard connection, and then the other one goes into the front of my desktop. Which, again, I'm on a sit-stand desk, so this stuff has to be able to move around and have enough cable length and all that, which it does. I'm good with that. The problem I had was configuring it. When you get this brand new, the joystick doesn't do anything. You have to download the Virpil software and then configure this, get your, let me see, what do they do? Dead zones, and you can do some button configurations, some drift stuff, some whatever little nuances you have to do, firmware updates, that kind of thing. So what's the problem with that? Well, the problem is my desktop, and it was because of my PlayStation controller. I actually have a PlayStation controller that I was using with some software to make the PlayStation controller work, which turns out I didn't need that. Steam works with it fine. But the problem I had, I think, was that program that I was using was interfering with the USB on these devices. And so the Virpil software would see that USB and say, I can't talk to anything, and it just wouldn't work. I had a hell of a time getting these things updated and firmwared and working. And like it had a ton of trouble. I spoke with Virpil and they gave me some ideas. Nothing really worked. Fortunately, I have a laptop. I had to actually take this laptop and put it into safe mode in order to do the firmware upgrades for both of these devices. The USB stuff just gets, I'm sure the track or the touchpad on my laptop was a problem. I don't know. There's some weird nuances, so you may run into problems with the USB. I don't understand why it can't just say this range of device or whatever, or they put some tag in there that says this is Virpil, not VKB. I got them on my mind. I don't understand why they can't just tag their device and have the software pick that tag up and say, okay, cool, I can work with it. It's like it pulls every USB device on your system. So you practically have to unplug everything, mouse, all of it. I don't know. Like I said, I had to go into safe mode on my laptop to get it to work, and I have not been able to get these. Of course, I haven't tried. But once I got them updated, it's like everything else. You spend so much time getting it to work, and by the time you get it to work, it's like, that was exhausting. I don't want to do that again. So, yeah, that was an issue. But once this thing is set up, man, I love playing Elite with this. I wished I had the twist. But that's not the fault of this particular piece of hardware. It's my fault. I bought the wrong one. But man, this just feels so good to play, and you get immersed in the environment. I love the T16000. It felt good to play and everything, but it always felt a little cheap and everything. With this thing, man, I fired up and I'm out there. I'm spaced out. I'm gone. And I think the Hotas in general, I would definitely encourage get a Hotas. Don't play with a controller. The controller works and all that, but it limits your buttons. Don't play with just the mouse and keyboard. It's okay. I tried Elite with mouse and keyboard. I hated it. First thing I did was buy a Hotas and then go to the other side of the universe. This a Hotas setup, and I would almost even argue that even a cheap Hotas is far and above keyboard, mouse, or controller. I mean, the immersion factor you get from having these things is incredible. And especially like this thing, I've got all these buttons. I can just kick back and my thumbs do almost all the work. I do a little bit of arm work. And like I said, I have some buttons configured on my throttle for other things. But for the most part, you're just sitting there flying along and you're good. You know, you don't have any issues. Everything just flows so nicely. I don't have any complaints. I bought the flight stick with the extra buttons because I thought, well, I'll never run out of buttons. And then I used them all, you know. So there's just a lot more options and a lot more comfort and a lot more realism using this than there is with any of the other devices you can have. And this is a very expensive unit. I don't know if I've done, you know, hopefully this has helped. I know I've talked a lot of negative things, but I'm more into a realistic expectation versus, you know, floating somebody's bubble or whatever. But I really like this setup and I like having that immersive factor. And this Hotas setup is fantastic. I cannot praise this thing enough. I'm not being paid for this. I like this unit. There are drawbacks to it though. Cost. I mean, you have to be able to afford this. If your paycheck is $800, there's no way you're going to buy this thing unless you save up for a long time. But you've got other things you have to worry about. So you have to take that into account. This is a very nice setup, but it's very expensive. So you have to take that into account. You know what I mean? I don't know. I ultimately, yeah, I would recommend this. And ultimately, if you just wanted to save up the money and buy it, you'll love it. I can't speak highly enough of this thing. In some ways, I kind of hate that it's built so well, because if they come out with a better model at some point that I want more, then I got to buy that one. You know what I mean? So that's a good problem. But all in all, I think this is a fantastic setup, and I think anybody that's playing should have a Hotas, period. Even if you just have the joystick part and you do the other pieces on the keyboard, that's fine. This stuff makes the game so much more immersive and better. They just do. So in closing, I love this thing, and I wished I played more. I do plan on playing some more Elite. They've got a big update coming this year, supposedly, big content update. I got kind of burned out on grinding engineering stuff and all that, and then all these other games came up. I have tried this in Arma. I forgot to mention that. I've got Arma 3. I tried the jets in there. I'm not a jet guy. I don't know how to fly. So that's why I got IL-2 Sturmovik. I figured I could at least try to learn some piloting somewhere on something easier. But it's all good. I mean, I got plenty of flight games to try this on. I just need to take the time to do it. So anyway, I'm rambling on. Love these. Recommend them. Hope you enjoyed the video.